All right, this one is going to be 4.2, graphing by coordinates. We'll say that this is my least favorite way of graphing, but let's start. So it says graph the line by locating any two ordered pairs that satisfy the equation -6, -8, or -6x minus -8y equals 0. There's a lot of flexibility with this. The only requirement is that your coordinates fall on like in between the tens. So your x's can't be greater than +10 to -10, and your y's can't be any larger than +10 and -10y. So we have an equation, -6x minus 8y needs to somehow equal 0. And for us, it doesn't matter what you pick for any of this so long as you get equations, numbers. And so pick just some x and y coordinates. So for us, just plop over here, say, hey, I need two coordinates. Let's go with 1 and 3. Okay. Notice I just filled out my x's. I don't have to fill out an x and a y, although I can. There are times where it's easier to fill out a y and then search for your x's. Sometimes it's easier to search an x and then a y. You'll never know until you actually start plugging in. So let's do that. Let's figure out what happens whenever I put a 1 in for x. So I got -6 times 1 minus 8y, and that needs to equal 0. -6 times 1 is just -6 minus 8y equals 0. I need to get y completely by itself, so I'm going to add 6 to both sides. I get a -8y equals 6. Divide by -8. And y will equal a negative, whatever that is, 0.75. 0.75. So up here, I'm going to write 0.75. And so 1 -0.75. That'll be that. This will all be drawn once like the graph gets made. So like don't worry about like putting the lines there. Just get the coordinates in. So now we're just gonna do it again, except this time instead of 1, we're gonna use 3, because apparently that's gonna work. We'll find out. So we're gonna use the same idea, except this time we're gonna say, you know what, we got colors. Let's not use purple. We'll use blue. 3. Right? 3. There we go. So 6. -6 times 3 is a -18 minus 8y equals 0. Plus 18. -8y equals 18 divided by -8 divided by -8. Y equals 18 divided by -8 is -2.25. And again, you're just going to write that in. So you got 3, -2.25. So put that in, and you'll get your graph. Let's see what that graph looks like. Yeah. So this is just what they chose. They chose 0 and 8. Okay. There's nothing wrong with picking either of these points. You just got to get 2. So again, you're just plugging in whatever numbers you want into this equation to get out something else. I would stick close to 0. 5s are about as far as I would comfortably go, especially whenever this graphs it for you. So, put a 0, put a 1. Doesn't matter. You are just plugging those numbers in, solving an equation, and getting a graph created for you. Speaking of graphs, we do need to talk about intercepts. So let's talk about intercepts. What just happened? Okay, there we go. So there are special points that we do need to make mention of. Mostly straight-ish. So if we want to graph using intercepts, we need to know what they are. An intercept is any point that falls directly on one of these axes. Axes? I don't know. So this is your x. Your x runs this way. Your y then runs this way. And what we're looking for, any of the coordinates that actually fall on this. So if a coordinate fell right here, this is an x intercept at 3, or for more specifically, a coordinate of 3, 0. So x intercepts mean that the number occurs with that letter. So 3 and x means that my x is 3 and my y is defaulted to 0. For a y-intercepts are just the opposite. So let's do right here at 2. This would be a y-intercept at 2. So for us, the coordinate 0, 2. 0 for the x, and your y is 2. Okay, so for us, use your knowledge of x and y intercepts to choose the correct graph of the following equations. What we need to do is plug in zeros into this equation to see where this graph is actually going to end up. So let's do that. Excuse me. Come down here. And all right. Perfect. Brand new page. Okay. So we have 5x minus 2y equals 10. And we need to know our x and y intercepts. So generally what I do is I just come over here and I throw a 0 in both of those, because that's what I need. Since this was my 0 for my x, this is technically a y intercept because you're trying to find y. This one down here will be my x intercept because I don't know what my x is. Okay. So for my x intercept, I need a 0 in for y. So let's do that. I have 5, don't know my x, minus 2 times 0, and that's going to equal 10. So 5x 2 times 0 is just 0, so I actually don't even need that. And then I'm going to divide by 5 to where I get x is now just 2. So I first need a coordinate at 2, 0, which is great because that means that for me, C and D don't work anymore, because if I have an x-intercept at 2, 0, that means I need to go to the right 2, 1, 2, and have a dot, and my blue line on both C and D do not cross at 2. They cross at -2, which doesn't help me. So I then need to look at A and B. A and B both have coordinates at 2. The problem is one is going up, this one's going down, which means we need to figure out our y-intercept. And so for our y-intercept, we're going to do the exact same thing, just in reverse. We're going to solve this equation. We're going to have 5x minus 2y equals 10. But instead of x, we're going to actually throw in a 0. So 5 times 0 minus 2y equals 10. 5 times 0 just doesn't exist. But this negative sign still does. So I have a negative 2y equals 10. Remember, that negative sign isn't attached to the 0 or the 5, it's attached to the 2. So how do I get rid of this negative 2? Well, it's touching the y, so I'm going to divide by negative 2, because whenever things are touching, they are multiplying. So here, y equals negative 5, so I can go up here and say my y-intercept is 0, negative 5. So which one of these has a blue line at negative 5? Well, this, if I go down here, negative 5 on the y is down here. There is no blue line here. That's up there. And so for us, our answer is going to be B. My x-intercept is 2, 0. 2, 0. So write 2 and a 0. And then my y-intercept is 0, negative 5. So 0, down 5. This one has both points being correct. So my answer is B. You're going to just do that for the rest of these. Some of these are going to be a little bit easier to find than others, but you are just plugging in x's or zeros in for x, 0 in for y at separate times and figuring out which is the correct answer. This one, it wanted to know what the actual intercepts are. So please pay attention. If it asks for the y-intercept, remember the y-intercept has an x value of 0. The x-intercept has a y value of 0. I know, not very helpful, but here we are. This is asking for intercepts again. Asking for intercepts. Oh, no, this one's just asking you to just graph using any 2 points. You can use whatever you want. And there you go. What's interesting, I will say, these are special types of lines. So let's talk about those. So let's look at special lines. You have 2 types, x only and y only. X only contain the letter x in their initial equation. So something like, 4x equals negative 12 or x equals 3, right? Both of these are x-only lines. Because they are x-only, I got a lot of people are like, oh, well, then it can only go this way. That means that they can only touch the x-axis, okay? Can only touch the x-axis, which means that technically x-only lines are actually vertical lines that go up and down. So for us, let's say that on this graph here, no, ignore this. Say that we have an x equals 3, or even a 4x minus, or 4x equals negative 12. You still have to solve this. You still have to get the letter by itself, and so you get something like x equals negative 3. I still need a line at x equals negative 3. And so what that means is I'm going to go over here. I'm going to find where x equals negative 3. So 1, 2, 3. I'm going to go ahead and put my dot there. But I need a second dot in order to actually create a line. And so I'm going to go either up or down from that at negative 3, and I'm just going to put a dot somewhere. It doesn't matter where I put it. I could put the dot up here. I could put it down here. So long as it has an x coordinate of negative 3, I'm fine. So x can only be negative 3, or x can be, whatever the equation actually ends up being. So for us, this one was an awful one, so let's get some new values in there. Here we go. So 3x equals negative 3. I need to solve this. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3, and I'm going to get x equals negative 1. Because I say x equals negative 1, I'm going to go left 1, hit my dot, and then draw a vertical line through that. As long as I have another coordinate with negative 1 as my x, it doesn't actually matter what my other coordinate is. It could be negative 1, 5. It could be negative 1, negative 5. It could be negative 1, 9. Negative 1, negative 1 even. So long as I only get a line when I only have an x, that's going to be a vertical line at that value. Which means y goes and does the opposite thing. Y only lines, you can have the easy ones where y equals 5, or you could have the more complex ones like this one, for y equals negative 4. With this, I don't actually know what y equals, so I have to solve it. And in order to solve this one, I'm going to divide by 4. And so y equals negative 1. Negative 4 divided by 4 gets me a negative 1. So what does that mean? Well, it can only be on the y-axis. If I could spell. And it didn't shoot up. There we go. So, only on y-axis. Because it can only be on the y-axis, you would think that it's vertical, but it is not. Y-only lines are horizontal. So, this way. So for us using this example up here, we have for y equals negative 4. We found that y equals negative 1. So what does that mean? Well, I'm going to go to negative 1 on my y, hit my dot, and then I'm going to go left and right and find another value where y equals negative 1. So again, I could have the coordinate 5, negative 1. Why does it work? Well, because it's still at negative 1 on my y-axis. What up? They chose 5 as well. I could also choose negative 5, 1. I could choose negative 9, negative 1. 10, negative 1. All of these work so long as my coordinate, my y coordinate, is negative 1. So for this, you just throw in whatever you want, negative 1. Whatever you want, negative 1. It'd be from negative 10 to 10. Okay. So there you go. Hope that helps.